welcome to the For Evansville podcast. This is a podcast about listening to the needs and dreams of our city. And we want you to love our city better so that you can be a part of its transformation. We don't want you to live in Evansville. We want you to be for Evansville. We're really excited about today's episode. We have got two guests. We have Gina, who's the CEO at the Christian Life Center. And we have Catherine, who is here with us, part of CharityTracker. So that's actually here at For Evansville, but we haven't seen her on the podcast yet. So welcome to both of you. So glad that you're here. Thank you. So we actually got a question from a listener that kind of sparked this whole conversation. And so it's a big question to unpack, and it's actually more about the idea of nonprofits hiring with grant money versus volunteer work. Relying on volunteer work, and what makes either a good volunteer, or if a person is coming from a position of being a volunteer, what makes that work meaningful for them so that they continue to come back. But that kind of in itself sparked the conversation of the idea of toxic charity. That came up a lot when we were kind of discussing this question. So let's unpack that first. Do you think people even know that this kind of language of toxic charity, or the idea that it could actually hurt more than help sometimes?
Well, I think that those who are in the work, in the trenches, understand what toxic charity is. Okay. Sometimes it's because they've read the book, or they've been to one of Robert Lupton's seminars, or, it doesn't, just anything like that. But I don't think the average person realizes that they could hurt individuals instead of help them. Okay. We call it sometimes the hero syndrome. Okay. And so hero syndrome being the volunteer wants to be the hero in the story of helping folks. When the bottom line is, it's the individuals that you help, they're the heroes of their own story. Yeah, that's good. Because they're the ones who are struggling and trying to pull themselves up and out of where they are. We're just there to assist them and help them along the way. But, when you start thinking that you're the hero, I use our Thanksgiving that we used delivery meals that we used to do for a story all the time. Someone was so excited to be able to deliver this meal to these individuals, and they just were so passionate about it, which is awesome. Right. But I said, you do realize that that's one meal. And you do realize that in a few hours, they're going to be hungry again. Yeah. And so the bottom line is you're doing that and we used it as a tool to get to know people and to share what our services were. But I think somewhere along the way, it became, I need to do this. What did you do to help folks this last year? Well, I delivered that Thanksgiving meal. Right. And it just felt yucky. It really did.
Yeah. Catherine, you had a story as well that I think you wanted to share.
Well, it's very eye-opening when you hear stories, because often we hear how many meals were delivered in your example, or how many boxes of food or Christmas presents given or whatever, and we feel really good about that. With CharityTracker, we talk more about outcomes. We want to see long-term outcomes, not just outputs. So looking at the impact of what we're doing and not just the act of service that we did. And I think those things are important because the hearts of the giver are in the right place. But organizations like Gina's have found ways to do that better than just the average person who says, I want to give, and so I'm just going to hand out money or whatever it is. I recently heard a story about a community effort where they realized that kids who were on free and reduced lunch were not eating over the summer or on the weekends. And so there have been similar programs throughout the country, but they organized backpacks full of food to go home with these kids, which is a wonderful thing. These kids, had easy mac and cheese or whatever to eat. Well, after time had passed, they realized that there were some unintended consequences of that program. Some of them being that the meals didn't actually make it home with the kids. They were sold or given to other people. But even worse than that is domestic violence rates increased among that community.
Domestic violence did?
Yes, because these families were embarrassed that other people knew they needed food. And they were mad at their kids for taking the backpacks, which then showed everybody that they were in need. And they didn't want to be labeled, and maybe shouldn't be labeled. And so it's just important to know that sometimes there are unintended consequences, even though our hearts and what we want to do is good.
Right. Yeah, I think that everyday kind of person that, whether it's a business or a church that they volunteer through, kind of, they have that kind of either one and done, or they don't, or it's almost like how I would want to be helped if I didn't have a Thanksgiving meal. I would love for somebody to give me a Thanksgiving meal. Or if I just didn't have good food for the summer, it would be great to get that. But I don't have those struggles every single day. And I think another one that I've heard is that you may give them that Thanksgiving meal, but do they even know how to cook it? Like, do they even know what to do with those vegetables that they've been given, because they haven't been trained how to cook a vegetable. And so I think it's really, like you guys have been saying, it's really important to know the stories. And that's where the nonprofits can do that work. So I think it's important to not just go rogue and try to do your own efforts, but to partner with that. Can you speak into that, like why it's good to have those community partners?
And I'm not saying that Thanksgiving meal or the food boxes that are given out were wrong.
Right.
You have to look at what the culture looks like now. I've been at the Life Center 16 years, and I've watched that transformation over the years. We strive now to give a helping hand up. We want to help folks. We teach health and nutrition classes, cooking classes. And so we want them to pick their own food. We switched from a food pantry to a food co-op. Yes, there are emergency needs for emergency pantries. But the food co-op piece is they're paying a small price for that food, and they're getting to choose the food that they like and that they want. And then we're helping them with, food and nutrition classes on how to cook it. Because just because you have it in there doesn't mean they know how to prepare it. So I think things have evolved, and I think more people are getting the how does helping hurt model, and how can I help them be successful? We want to help them reach their potential. We want to help them be better, and it's not about the volunteers or the organization, it's about the person. And so how can we come alongside of them? How can we mentor? Be a community advocate? So there are so many different ways now than what used to be volunteerism, what it looks like now. It's totally different.
Okay. So that's what I was thinking. If I'm hearing this for the first time, if I'm a person that just either attends a church and tries to do my volunteer work through there, or even businesses that connect to the nonprofits, I might feel a little scared now. How can I really help, and how can I do good work? So can you talk about what a good partnership would look like?
Sure. We still have just like you said, one and done volunteer projects that people can come in, they can do I call them drop and run. And so they drop in, they do a volunteer act for the day, and then they leave. Yeah. And that's okay. Some people's lives are very, very busy, and they can only do that type. A lot of what our volunteer positions look like is community advocates. They're sitting alongside of them. So in our family care services, they're being that person after a person interviews them and finds out what's really going on in their household. What are their needs? And so then they're partnering with them and meet with them once or twice a month so they can check in on them. They're helping them create a budget. Then they're helping hold them accountable to that budget. And so they're helping them walk that journey, but the folks that we serve, they're the leaders of their own lives. And so because we're there to suggest and help. We're not there to tell them what to do. And so a lot of times there have been volunteers in the past that would look at them and go, oh, but they still need to do X, Y, and Z. But you know what? They maybe made it to C, and that's okay with them. And they're good. And we have to be okay with that. Their potential is the potential that they get in their heads. And so sometimes we want more for them than they want for themselves. And we have to step back and just be there as that cheerleader and that support system. So when you look at volunteerism now, what it looks like can be a lot more time consuming sometimes. It can be a little scary because people's lives are messy. And sometimes you get in the mess of that. We provide some training courses so people can help them understand boundaries and what those healthy boundaries look like.
I think that's one of the challenges of this is you may not be able to help as many people.
Right.
Because it's not just a one-time handout. It's walking through the messiness of life with them.
Yes.
Which is a lot harder. And often the outcomes aren't as positive seeming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, look at what we did.
Yeah.
It's a long-term process and you're in it with them, but it allows them to have their dignity.
Yes.
Every person has something to give.
That's right.
No matter what stage of life they're in. And often we forget that, we want to give them assistance, but in a lot of ways, they can give us perspective and help us see things that we didn't before.
Yeah. One of our stats that we've been sharing is that, and you might know this as well, it costs kind of the government about $26,000 a year for one person to live in poverty.
Right.
And so if you think about the widespread impact of, let's say, delivering a meal, you can say, I just affected, 20 people's lives today by delivering meals door to door. Or you can turn around and say, I saved my community $26,000 this year, but also next year and the next and the next by walking one person out of poverty, and that long-term impact of even then their families after that, the generations that they're affecting. And so I think that what you guys are saying is so important. Catherine, I want to talk to you a little bit more about CharityTracker. You mentioned it, and that's why you're here, but can you explain to anybody who may not know what that is?
Yeah, so CharityTracker is a tool that For Evansville is currently providing to the greater Evansville area. And what it is essentially is a shared database. The Evansville Christian Life Center is on board, and we have about 62 other organizations in the area, most of them nonprofits, some churches.
Okay.
And they're using it to share information, to share case files for, oftentimes one organization is not the sole provider of services for an individual. And so they can share that information across this platform so that they're helping this person not just in their silo for their organization, but holistically. They may be helping with one piece of it, and another organization may be helping with a different piece of their poverty journey. And this is just a tool for them to collaborate. And we're seeing a lot of momentum with it. We've seen excitement. It takes a while for that data to get in the system. We just started using it during the pandemic, and we're starting to see some fruit come out of it. Gina, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about why your organization jumped on board with CharityTracker.
Yeah.
What we were the most excited about is being able for a client that walks through our doors. We're not the only one helping them, and nor do we want to be. We know what we're good at, and that's what we do, and we refer them to other people. Well, think about this. They're having transportation issues, and with gas, the cost of it is, even if they have a car, gas is astronomical right now. And so think about every place they go to get help, they have to fill out a whole new set of paperwork, the same thing over and over. What CharityTracker does is eliminates that and literally gives them the dignity dignity and respect of saying, you know what, you're in our system, and so we want to help you pieces that we do at this organization, and you're already in there. So now I'm going to refer you to these other organizations. And so when you go to the other organization, they're going to know your name, because they can see your information in the system, and it just helps move things quicker so much. I mean, it literally gives them dignity and respect of not having them run around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to get help from everybody and taking so long to get through that process. Whereas if your information's already there, you don't have to do that over and over.
And I can imagine maybe it's kind of the feelings that they may get from the people that are trying to help them, maybe suspecting things of them wrongly, or so they're able to look them up in the system and say, okay, they're on this journey. How can I help them? And like I said, treating them as these are human beings that just need some help, and we want to be able to do that for them.
We've also seen better referrals able to be made.
Yeah.
A lot of these organizations, they're in the weeds each and every day doing the work on the ground that they don't often look up to see what other organizations are doing around them.
Right.
And almost every time a new organization joins CharityTracker, they will look in the service directory and say, oh, I didn't know the Christian Life Center did this program. I thought they only did, this one that they've heard about. And so they're able to learn what's going on in the community. They're able to see what qualifications they need for services at a specific agency. And so then they don't show up and say, oh, actually, you're not qualified. They can get that referral into that system. That organization knows they're coming, knows they're already qualified, and they can get them the help they need faster.
Yeah, it seems like common sense, but it is, you're not recreating the wheel each time.
Exactly.
You're saying, hey, like, they can do this. Let's talk to them because they've been doing it for years, rather than let's try to make our own thing to help solve this problem. That's really awesome. Okay, so one of the questions that we got, this is taking a little bit of a turn, is this idea of hiring professionals using grant money versus volunteers. So you were just telling me on the way up here that you have a lot of people on staff, which I didn't realize. Yeah. So where have you seen a tension there, or how do you balance that out with taking volunteers every day and having to hire professionals to do some of this work?
If we had to have a staff person for every place we have to serve, we'd have probably about 30 to 35 staff members. When in reality, we have about 19 spots. And we're down by 6, by the way. But anyway, the bottom line is there are, for instance, I'll use the clothing department. It works better with 2 part-time staff, and then we do great with 6 to 8 volunteers in that area. So most of ours is a staff member that really directs the volunteers in each area. So same thing back in our family care services area. We do great with 1 paid staff member, and the rest are all advocates who come in and volunteer their time, and we train them.
Okay.
Same thing in other areas at our health clinic. Now, obviously, at the health clinic, we do have to have medical volunteers.
Sure.
So that's a little bit different, but we hire a base staff. We have a nurse practitioner and 2 RNs, a dental hygienist, and an office person. And so we have that staff, but we need many other volunteers. And so all the dentists that come to our dental program all volunteer their time. We don't pay for dentists that walk through our doors. Wow. So we have a little bit different approach to it. We do better with having 1 or 2 staff members per area, because the bottom line is we love our volunteers, but when they want to go on vacation, they don't have to ask permission.
Right.
They just go.
Yeah.
Or if they just don't want to come on this Tuesday, then they just don't come. And they may call you and say, hey, I'm just not going to be there. But, so having staff as the backbone and then having volunteers to supplement is what works best for us.
Okay. So if somebody wants to come volunteer, let's say with you guys, or maybe you can speak for other nonprofits that you know of since you've been in this world a long time, that want to have a meaningful connection. Maybe people aren't finding that satisfaction with, maybe if I come in and say I want to volunteer and you say, okay, well, you can help sort these clothes. Like maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe somebody else wants to do that, and that's totally great. But like, how can I as a person coming in offer either my services in the best way, or what's that connection between the just everyday person and the nonprofit? Kind of how does that work?
Sure. The first thing that we do is we take them on a tour. So we bring them in and talk to them and literally describe everything that we do from beginning to end, which is quite a lot. And so we tell the story, take them on a tour, and find out what their passions are.
Yeah.
You and I know that if they don't volunteer where their passions are, they're going to last maybe 6 months.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
And so you really need to find. So there have been people who have come in and right in the middle of talking, they're saying, well, I really want to help school-age children with their homework after school. And I say, we don't do that. But the Dream Center and Pottersville do that. And so we feel like we can help connect them to their passions because they're going to be more successful. I mean, yes, I could have them come in just like you said and sort clothes, but if they don't want to sort clothes, I don't like rummage sales. I'm not good at sorting clothes. I have to have the hangers all go in the same direction. I'm too OCD. So, I mean, we have to find where they're passionate. And so maybe it's teaching adolescent kids in our Truth Talk, which is our absence education. So they become facilitators of that. Maybe it's being an advocate or a community partner for our GAIN initiative. They want to help a family, a household move out of poverty. And so they want to be that advocate. So that's where we try and pair them up with what they're passionate about.
Do you think that some people don't realize that their own personal skill set that they've been equipped and trained in actually is needed in the nonprofit world too?
Absolutely. Yeah. There are so many areas we can't hire everything that we need. And so we rely heavily on the community. I mean, even whether they're a board member or a volunteer coming in, once they once they go on the tour, they get paired up with what their passions are, then we're going to try and help them meet that passion. Now, sometimes in the middle of doing, I can give you an example. A lady started back in our family care services, and she was a friend of mine. And she, after literally about 3 months, she goes, Gina, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but she said, I absolutely hate it back there. Oh, no. And she said, here's the deal. It's like telling your kids what to do, telling them something to do, and they don't do it. They're like these belligerent teenagers, and they don't listen. And I'm like, well, okay, we need to move you somewhere else, number one. And number two, you're trying to tell them what to do. They're the leaders of their own lives. You need to come alongside of them and support them, but not tell them what to do. And so sometimes it's just helping people move forward.
Yeah. That's another lesson I've learned with this whole idea of toxic charity is oftentimes we look at a problem and we say, well, this person is homeless, so they need a house. However, there are, and you and this GAIN initiative have all these laid out, which I think is wonderful. But often it's relational or substance abuse. They don't have the support that they need. It's not just a house that they need.
No,
it's a wide variety of things that feed into this issue. Yeah. And so recognizing that it's not as simple as it seems.
No.
The hard part of that is it can seem overwhelming.
It can.
Yeah.
And so that's the question I would have for you is how do you make this issue small enough in your mind that you can do this work each and every day for however many years you've been there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Without getting overwhelmed and saying this problem isn't getting better in our city.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had an instance last week. When we got there that morning, a gentleman was sleeping on our porch. He still had his tet hose and his hospital socks on. He had gotten released from the hospital the night before. He lives in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and he didn't have a way to get home. And so somehow, I'm not going to go there, but somehow he got released without knowing where he was going, and he had been in the heart area of the hospital. Wow. And so, so we worked all day long trying to get this man, and then as the day went on, then trying to get him a bed for overnight. So there are a lot of issues still in our community, and talking about being weird, I was exhausted at the end of the day. Give me 50 donors to talk to. Give me 5 banquets to speak in front of. But doing that kind of work is overwhelming sometimes. And so, I've recognized in our staff at different times that they need a break because you do get to the point sometimes when we don't have enough shelter beds, when there's a family living in their car and we can't find some place for them, so we partner with over 150 different agencies locally. And I don't know how many we went through last week. We finally did get him placed. And to our knowledge, he got home. Good. And so, yes, to our knowledge. So, but no, it can be very weary. And you literally have to take it one step at a time. What does he need first? Well, we brought him inside. And he was shivering. He needed a blanket. And so we found that for him. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, after we got out of him, that he was on the streets that last night. He needs food. So one thing at a time. And so like you said, take the most important things. Yes, they might need a house. But there are all these other things first. You can throw them in a house, but they don't have the social support system. And so there are so many things. And GAIN, our anti-poverty initiative, there are 11 different resources that we meet that most families don't have. And so it's walking that journey and figuring out one step at a time what they need most.
Oh, one step at a time. It does it. It's like, how do you eat an elephant?
Yes,
one bite
at a time. Yeah.
How long do you typically work with a family? I know each story is unique, but on average, how long would a family care service person or whatever, how long would they work with a family?
If they're in our GAIN initiative, GAIN works with them. It's a 16-week class. Once they complete that, then that's when the hard work starts and they join the network. And they're with us then from 12 to 18 to 24 months at that point. They can continue to come to the network meetings. They're monthly. They can still meet with Stephen, who's our director over that. But that's the average time. And it depends on if it's generational poverty or not. Then in our family care services, if they come when they're pregnant and we help walk them through that journey, we have them until they're 3. The child turns 3. And so could be for 3 years. Now, at that point, they could move on to GAIN. And so, it really just depends on what stage and where they are. But we want families to be successful. And you talking about, numbers. Everybody used to quote all these numbers and we fed this many people and blah, 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 blah. The bottom line is it's about getting them to reach their potential. And so, it's somebody who last year we had 4 of our participants in GAIN graduate from Ivy Tech. One is out at USI now, and so on staff. And so, it's looking at it, and that's a huge success. Not everybody is that what they look at for success, but that was their success. And so we can quote you numbers of how many households we've taken, out of poverty. But the bottom line is where is that family at along that journey? We're just helping them along the journey.
Wow. Okay, well, I think that's it. I did want to wrap up with, if you could just tell the city of Evansville, just the average person here, something that you've always wanted to share with them, or say this is the one thing that they need to know about either the work you're doing or this idea of toxic charity or anything. Do you have anything that you would just want to share?
I would say get outside of your comfort zone, take a journey around the city, get off the Lloyd Expressway, get off Green River Road, get off of Lynch, Wherever that is, go in a neighborhood you've never been before and tour a nonprofit that you think you might be passionate about. Take a tour. Find out what they do because like you said a while ago, there's a misconception about a lot of us. Well, they do this and they do that, when in truth, COVID changed a lot of what we do.
Oh, yeah.
It changed everything. And so we're all about education in every area now. And so I would just say, get involved. I always say there's 3 ways they can get involved. Prayer support first, second is volunteerism, and third is financially. Because every nonprofit in the city needs all 3 of those things because we're on the front lines every day.
Yeah.
So just get out of their comfort zone.
All right. That's good.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for sharing. I think that's it.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having
thanks for listening.
me.
All right, thanks.